I would like to invite on stage for a panel discussion on Arctic energy and resource security, Mr. Greg Poelzer. Greg, oh, there he is. Greg, the floor is yours, your panel. Very welcome, Greg.
Thank you very kindly for the warm introduction, and I want to thank the Polar Foundation for organizing this, and of course, Government of Canada, especially to support my ability to participate and their contributions to this conference as well. Greg Poelzer, I'm from the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and I do a lot of work over the last 30 years, both in Russia and in Scandinavia. I'm an academic by training, a political scientist. Yeah, but outside of my academic life, I work also in industry as a negotiator for SaskPower, which is our state-owned utility in the province of Saskatchewan. So I approach the issue of energy both with an industry hat and also with academic hat. But I was talking, one thing I've learned coming from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, people ask, when they see it, how do you pronounce it? And you just pronounce it the way it's written, of course. But but there's my mother was just visiting us this past weekend. Told me she was in Minnesota, our neighbor in the United States, just south of us, and she was watching this couple, an American couple, and this American couple, the wife said to her husband, "Go ask where these two other people are from, because they look kind of strangely dressed, wintertime, almost Hawaiian clothes on and so on." It was very odd. And he didn't want to, they're complete strangers. And so he says, she eggs him on, and finally he gives up, "Okay, I'll go and ask." So the American husband walks over to these two people and he says, I don't want to intrude or anything, but I'm just curious, where are you, my wife and I were just wondering, where are you people from? And the other husband responded, "Saskatoon, Saskatchewan." So he turned around, went back. His wife's all excited, and he said, "Where are these people from?" He says, "I don't know, they don't speak English, but it's..." But anyhow, it's the topic we're engaged in today is of course, you can tell from the previous 2 days' discussions, incredibly important, and important not the least for two big reasons. Obviously, climate change, as Senator John Kerry said at the Glacier Conference back in 2015 in our neighbor to the west of us, Alaska. Energy is the solution to climate change. But in terms of security, we're all very much aware, as we know over the last couple of days, of the geopolitical realities. And so there's some very sobering challenges ahead of us in terms of this panel's discussion of Arctic energy and resource security. And what I hope to do through this panel, we have a very distinguished folks who are going to be speaking from different sectors in the Arctic, both on energy and minerals. And we have three questions we hope to go through that deal with everything from, more broadly, the geopolitical context and what this means for the Arctic for energy. The second question is going to look at Arctic security from an Arctic perspective, from the local residents' perspective, and what is going on from that perspective. And the third is going to focus around especially the mineral industry, because that goes hand in hand. You can't have a low-carbon future without mining. That is a reality. And so what are the pathways forward? So as someone commented earlier about green energy is only good energy if it's done well. And so these things all connect together. So I'm going to invite our panelists to come up, and I'm going to please take a chair. We're going to do this Phil Donahue style. It's and I'm going to follow the order that's listed in the, when we go through our questions. Okay. I'm going to follow the order in the thing, so feel comfortable where everyone wants to sit. Now, all of you will be able to read their biographies in the well put together information, so I'm not going to go through and read all the biographies one by one, but I will introduce people that and share with you a couple of things about each panelist you don't know. Yeah, that's not in the official biography. And we'll start by introductions. Rasmus Wendt. He's Rasmus. Yeah, is the head of the division for the Ministry of Agriculture, Self-Sufficiency, Energy, Environment, and Greenland. His favorite color is green, and he's a Cancer. Kristín Linda Árnadóttir. She is the deputy CEO of Landsvirkjun, which is a utility, of course, in Iceland. Her favorite color is yellow, and she is a Virgo. Kjell Giæver is the general manager of Arctic Energy Partners and chairman of Norway Energy Cluster. And Kjell is, his favorite color is blue, and he is a Scorpio, as all good people are. And Hákun Djurhuus, he's the CEO of SEV. Where are you, Hákun? Thank you. And which is the electrical utility for the Faroe Islands. And Hákun is green, and he too is a Scorpio. Martin Phillips, representing very importantly the mining sector or interests on the panel, is from CEO of Talga Europe. And Martin's favorite color is blue. He was, yes, you're dressed for the occasion, and he's a Sagittarius. And last but not least is Willfred Nordlund, who is the vice chair of the Arctic Delegation of the Norwegian Parliament. And very appropriately for the Arctic, his favorite color is white. And he is an Aries. So this is, please give a warm welcome to our distinguished. So I'm going to, the first question to ask to get straight to the point is, and we'll start with Rasmus and work our way through, is how has the Russian invasion of Ukraine changed the calculus for global energy security, and what does this mean for Arctic and subarctic regions, especially thinking about the Arctic and subarctic regions as energy producing regions?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation. Let me start by saying that the main security issue in Greenland is not the assault on Ukraine, that's climate changes, and that is endangering our supply of energy. But that being said, what we can see is an increased interest in developing renewables in Greenland. And I think that's very important. Greenland, not Greenland, Europe was already on path for a green transition before the assault in February. And what we see now is that climate policy has very much become security policy. So what we will do in Greenland is that we will step up the process to invite investors to invest in renewable energy in our country. So in that sense, it's sort of going hand in hand, the security situation with our overall development goals.
Okay, thank you. Kristín.
Yes, well, as I see it, we were on a certain path. We were on a certain path toward being with energy systems that were more climate friendly. We are going to phase out fossil fuel, going to more renewables, but suddenly we needed just to speed up the process. And coming from a country, Iceland, which we are 85% of our energy use is renewable, we could really feel how this is a huge benefit. And I can see that many other countries thought, well, why didn't we do this sooner? However, if you want to go towards renewable energy, you need land, you need space. Solar, wind, hydro, they are all very sort of like land intensive. Even though you put it out to the sea, there is not all sea areas that is suitable for it. So, and then I think the Arctic comes in again, because there you have a big area of the land, you have good wind qualities and so forth. So I would say also, like Rasmus, we've been feeling a lot more interest toward Iceland, toward Arctic regions, to be sort of like energy producer of renewable energy for the future. Sort of like, and then e-fuels, not oil and gas as in the past. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Kjell.
Thank you for the invitation and dear guests. The energy, and especially the energy from the Norwegian Arctic, has come to large geopolitical issues. In these days, the naval army from all over Europe is in our waters, patrolling the oil and gas installations. Without the gas from the Arctic, there would be a total energy crisis, much stronger than we see today. Not many are aware of that 30% of the gas to Europe from Norway comes from the northern part of Norway. And 20% of the gas comes north of the polar circle. And we also see a lot of European companies and states now taking positions in natural gas in the Arctic. A new pipeline just opened to Poland, to Denmark, bringing gas from the Arctic to Poland, and Wintershall taking positions, a large German company, in the Norwegian Arctic. So we have gone from a position we call it, from banning to begging. And if Norwegian are going to continue, because now we're talking about energy security, if Norway are going to continue to take this position, we need to explore more. From 2030, we will not be able to deliver these amounts of gas to Europe. So Europe needs to take into consideration their energy policy related to Norwegian Arctic. How can we secure gas for Europe in short terms and also in mid terms? Thank you.
Thank you. Hákun.
The World Energy Dilemma Index, containing energy security as one of the 3 dimensions, has changed dramatically for many of us by the invasion. Many regions in Arctic are rather isolated, so they have to stand on their own, so to speak. And many regions still rely on oil for the energy supply. This means higher oil prices and increased risk for not being able to supply. This new situation is putting pressure on and for the green transition. But high oil prices, they actually are making that green business case more healthy in economic terms too. There are also pressure for the political system, on the political system to deal with forces which want to find oil in these areas, well knowing that risk of pollution is higher and the local environment is very fragile. Despite skyrocketing oil prices, the Faroe Islands, as sub-Arctic archipelago, serves as an example with high ambitions regarding renewable energy. Our vision is 100% carbon-free electricity production by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. This is possible with our abundant resources like wind, hydro and tidal, complemented with solar and biomass. Here, ambitions and science have to work together in a good way and in good cooperation with the political system, and authorities are also needed.
Thank you, Hákun. Martin.
Well, Greg, I am part of the mining industry, and if you weren't aware, Talga is operating in the northern part of Sweden. We're in the business of developing battery materials, advanced materials for the energy storage sector. So the invasion has obviously elevated, I think, the priority around the security of supply chains. It is primarily in the northern part of Sweden already renewables, so the green transition is already been operating there for a long period, and it's a great demonstration, I think, that the Arctic region can play a very, very important role now in delivering both the green transition and delivering a renewable energy and a solution, I think, to weaning ourselves off fossil fuels. I think at the same time the local value chains, it exposes the critical raw material supply issue when you look at the fact that Europe has outsourced both its energy requirements as well as its raw materials requirements. Indeed, similarly, Russia, China is also the key supplier of Europe's energy storage solution, its raw materials. So I think it's broadening now really the scope as to what Europe has to be now preparing, and there is a great sense of urgency. I agree fully that there are some major issues to overcome, such as land and those sorts of things. But I do think the Arctic is going to be playing a key role here, and I think we will, at the end of the day, be a primary focus for this as a solution.
Thank you, Martin. Willfred.
Yes, thank you, Greg. I'm the policymaker of the panel, so I'm the one that has to answer all the difficult questions on how on earth are we going to make this possible, and within a legal framework, and also together with the local municipalities and so on, to provide Europe and of course the rest of the world with green and energy which is renewable and sustainable into the longer future. But politicians always say that the main reason for the severe energy situation we are in Europe is the Russian war against Ukraine. Both yes and no, actually, if you are correct. Because it's something naive that has led to that you are demanding one supplier for every change of your energy supply. And even my 3-year-old at home knows that if he tries to take every egg out of the fridge at the same time, it most likely will go wrong, at least when the egg hits the ground. And this is like when you are when you have a house, when you are saying, oh, it's not, and it's unlikely it's going to burn. But you make an insurance anyway, so you are sure that you have some measurements in risk management under control if everything goes wrong. And unfortunately, that's something we haven't done in the appropriate amount of different risk management over time. So that's a political issue, and we know the answer. We have a severe situation for the energy sector with skyrocketing prices, volatility, and so on the energy prices, which is one of the key things that people want in their life to risk management. They have to know, can I pay the gas bill? Can I pay the electricity bills? Or for business owners, I'm able to produce the goods for the same price next year as I did this year? And the answer to that with the situation is clearly, no, you can't. And then we have the situation that everyone is feeling, and the politician has to answer both for mistakes made in the past, but also address how are we going to do this into the future. And for the Arctic, as one of the main research regions in Europe, both in terms of gas, electricity, other solutions that will make energy, and of course on the mineral side, this is both a possibility but also a challenge. A challenge in the legal framework, they're working with sustainability, how do you do this together with the indigenous people, and how can we provide the market with all this energy with security in the bottom. And that we have to do together with the European Union and other European nations. And there are three main problems we have to solve. First one, we need people. Second, we need money. And the third is, how on earth are we going to get all this energy to the consumers in that?
Right. No, thank you, Willfred. So I'm going to switch gears from more the geopolitical situation and energy in the Arctic and shift it to more the Arctic community level, the Arctic communities themselves. And we're seeing that there is more and more deployment of renewable energy systems across the Arctic. But here's a big question. Have we learned the lessons from the past? And one of the things when we've looked at energy systems, we've looked at just price per kilowatt hour, right? In the capital investment on a plant. But have we really started to shift the paradigm to think about the full social and economic value of the new energy systems that we're seeing in the future, and calculating those kind of benefits on a socio-economic more broadly, beyond the price per kilowatt hour? And so I'll start with Rasmus again.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I think it's a difficult question to answer from a Greenlandic perspective. Greenland is the poorest region in the Nordic region, or the poorest country. So price of energy does matter. It matters for households, it matters for industry. It's an energy intensive industry you have, fishery in Greenland. So it does matter, the price of electricity and kilowatt hours. And that's something working for the government of Greenland that we have to pay very close attention to. Luckily for us, we can actually produce energy to some of the world's lowest prices ourselves by using renewables. The hydropower we have in Greenland, or the potential hydropower resources we have, we can produce electricity to a price very, very low. So for that reason, we can actually move along. But still, it's something that we have to calculate the price of energy. That being said, that it's not because Greenlandics don't want to pay their fair share to avoid climate change. They very much do. But economic development of Greenland is also a key issue. And we need to make sure that our development in our country goes hand in hand. So we have economic development and basically can be independent on subsidies from Denmark, basically.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Kristín.
Yes, I'm reflecting a little bit of my experience as the chair of the expert group on black carbon and methane, which is under Arctic Council. Well, it's 1.5 years since I was the chair. It was handed over to Russia, but there we could find that, of course, it is more expensive to put in new energy carriers in very sort of like isolated communities. However, we have many, many really good examples where it was a huge success. It is more capital intense to get in hydro or solar or wind or building up these systems. You can almost call it a community systems of energy. However, when you get it up and running, you are looking for a long-term gain, both in respect to climate, and you have to remember that soot or black carbon is a very potent climate pollutant, and but also to sort of like local air quality, so just health benefits directly. And also when we were talking about this 1.5 years ago, we were also looking at energy security for these communities. That is really difficult to get oil and gas over very vast areas to these communities. So we have good examples, we have good policy measures to show that this can work. And we were sort of like trying to push up these good examples and getting the communities to talk together, because one size does definitely not suit all, but also dragging up sort of like what does not work. I loved one example that was sort of like getting stoves more cleaner, so that you could reduce the soot emissions. However, the only thing that really happened that you had more cleaner ovens, but people just used them more and bought more of them. So the net result was none. So sometimes you put policies in actions and they don't really work. So we also need to think about those things. But if we also address what we can learn from the Arctic and then take it into our current situation. And I'm thinking about Ukraine and the reports that we were getting that the energy transmission system and energy system is being hit. And to rebuild energy system is a really complex maneuver, because they are complex, they are interconnected, and there you can see that sometimes there is more resilience in those smaller communities, because they have for such a long time learned how to rely on just themselves. And this is one of the issues that we need to address for the future if we are going to have more share of renewables. How do we, with this interconnection, still maintain the level of security of the energy need that the people need from day-to-day basis? Wind is not always blowing. Well, in Iceland, probably yes, but sun, definitely not. So we can see this, this is also a question of concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristín. Kjell.
Thank you. Going from the gas to renewables, as also the Norwegian Arctic is a large region producing renewables, actually one of Europe's largest region for renewable resources, and we have more than we use. So these days a lot of hydropower goes right into the sea. It's terrible. We should use it, but we have decided that the Norwegian Arctic shall be the first region in Europe reaching the Paris goal. We will be the first region reaching the 55%, as we have decided in Norway, for emission, and also by 2050. And we are doing this by using this renewable, decarbonizing our industry. We are not so many people living in the north, 9% of Norwegian population, but we have 6 million tons of emission. But very less public emission, but we have industrial emission. And all these industrial emissions have very concrete plans now for reducing their, both with carbon capture, replacing it with hydrogen, transmitting the aluminium industry with electricity. So we are actually certain that we will reach the goals in the Arctic. But I'll give one example of how difficult things will be up front. Because, and this I learned actually 6 months ago, so you can learn something every day. But because one of the main issues why we because we want to create your jobs of this. And actually in the northern part of Norway, we are no lack of carbon emission. Listen to this. We are lack of carbon emission. Because a lot of the new industry needs carbon. And since we have been so fast transforming the industry, the carbon is being put into a sustainable chain already. So new industry from worldwide seeking the north for low energy prices miss carbon emission into the value chain. So a lot of question is coming up. But the most important thing for me and my association is that this is energy transition creates jobs and opportunities. And when we saw the oil and gas business into the north, we had a lot of hope and worked hard that would create a lot of ripple effects. It has created ripple effects, but not as much as we hoped. But now when we see the energy transition, the new train is starting and we are on the same starting line. But this will not be easy. So we all have to unite in the Arctic. How can this energy transition benefit value creation and jobs and people moving to the Arctic? So this is an invitation. How can we unite in the value creation of the energy transition? Thank you.
Could you, the one example, I want to borrow off, Kristín was providing some examples, but I was thinking about in northern Norway as well as Iceland, Berlevåg. If you could speak very briefly about that.
I think we have people from Berlevåg in the audience, or at least East Finnmark, okay. Because there you have this, you have like a lot of dilemmas. You have the indigenous people, you have a lot of wind power, you have a lack of infrastructure, right. The infrastructure for transporting energy, and what can you do then? And what they have done is to build a large wind farm, of course in good cooperation with the Sami people, and now together with a European project producing hydrogen on a pilot directly from the wind farm, later transforming it to ammonia, and later to that being a part of a value chain decarbonizing the Svalbard community. So a good value chain using renewables into the new era, who can be copied anywhere else in the world, I hope.
Thank you. Hákun.
Yeah. Looking back in time, I also learned something. In 2014, our company announced as a frontrunner this 100 by 2030 vision. It was a question about timing, and that was the right time, because 5 years later, at the election for the Parliament of the Faroe Islands, every political party had the vision on their agenda. Since 2014, the power company have worked according to this roadmap, this vision, in the supply track. But the speed in the demand track has been too slow. That is the consumer behavior. And that is where the political system has a task to play. But with this very high oil prices right now, we have the moment, we now see an increase in the demand, on the demand side for solutions, and now we are hitting bottlenecks in supply of equipment. The green shift, this green transmission, is a shift from oil to renewables. When you shift, you have to be aware of that you have a balance in economic this supply, demand, the price, and you go to another balance.
Right.
And if you want a fast shift, that there is a task or a job for the political system to be done. Otherwise, it can be much slower. And in this political job, there's also possibilities to take into account social and economic values that you want to take care of. Building a new energy system, you always go out making influence on some local areas. So dealing with local society is necessary, and they need to have some benefits out of this. As examples, you can take local partnerships, you can take landowner income and job creations and infrastructure, as mentioned. Some examples of how to deal with local society.
No, thank you, Hákun.
Thank you.
And that's a good reminder that these are not just social technical transitions. There's a political dimension. Thank goodness you're coming up last, Willfred. Martin.
So, Greg, this is an interesting question, actually, because the mining industry certainly coming towards where we are today, we've definitely learnt very much a lot of lessons around social acceptability and maximising the value socially. Talga itself, we're working with 3 Sami groups and upward of probably 40 landowners in and around the area. So today I don't think there are any ability to not engage directly. I do it myself. I am at all the meetings with the community. I'm at all the meetings with the Sami and the groups, speaking to them, and it's an open forum. It's a transparent dialogue. It's a process of free and informed mining information, and in that dialogue we are understanding how they operate and how the community moves through the area and uses the land. It's a critical part of exploration. It's not just about mining. Starting at a very, very early stage, it's absolutely critical to begin that process. The Sami use the area for reindeer herding, for instance, and they are there during the winter months. We are drilling and doing other work in the summer months, and it's a process that we've started with them, and that'll continue through mining. We are mining only in the summer. We're looking at underground type development work now to really minimise how big a footprint mining creates. We're clearly looking at where we're storing materials and how we close operations. All of these sorts of resources have a finite life. And I think part of the issue with mining industry is the legacy that's left behind and people walk away. Very much now governments are very focused on how you're closing. And really the aim for the social objectives of any mining company should be to make sure that the community are left after mining with a standard of living that's better had you not been there. And that's really the principle and the key objective of how to create dialogue. Globally, of course, the same objective for the Sami is for us. Climate change is affecting everyone. It's moving the snow line. It's affecting areas that the reindeer can herd. So there's that common objective, but no one particularly wants it in their backyard, and that's always going to be the case here. But I feel that coexistence can only come by problem solving together and a mutual understanding and some trust and respect. I think at least that people are being heard, and where there is a conflict, which will occur, then the government and the policy and And the processes you follow should be clearly mapped, at least so people understand how their voice will be heard.
Thank you. Willfred.
Yes. How do we? The question was, how do we maximize the social and economic value for the Arctic communities and region, both of regards of energy, but also in regards of minerals and instant in every aspect of business and development. One of my other roles is that I'm the chairman of the standing delegation of business and industry in the Norwegian Parliament as well. And this question comes on our table on a regular basis, and as a matter of fact, every week. But now it's, for example, in Norway, if we are going to look at it a little bit locally, we have a debate on, or going to have it, on a new mineral strategy. We are going to get a new mineral law next year. It has taken 4 years, 5 years. But where the mapping, which Martin was talking about, and how we are proceeding with the discussion, both with indigenous people, but also the municipalities, and how do you maximize the value for the local communities. If you see it on the lack of people, of course, it's people that we are lacking most. And if you're asking a local municipality and a politician locally, it will always take the job before the tax revenue from land tax or ground tax or whatever, because that will make it prosperous in itself, the local municipalities. But we have to solve this question around the original land usage I saw outside here that it was stating under the Arctic Future Symposium, so it was a dynamic Arctic, I think it stood, not the future or so on. And I think that is something people have to work with, because as humans, we don't like changes. Right. We don't like the dynamic. There are only some few of us, if we are honest, that actually like change. It's only a few of us that does, but if we are going to solve the major problem of climate pollution and the rising temperature and ice melting, we have to do it together, and we also have to accept the fact that we have to change if we are going to manage that, and not only by a force from outside, that is a large shift, but actually because we are dependent on that. If we don't manage it both in the local level, in the business level, and in the policy making, we actually have a problem in the future. And thereby the answer to the question, do we have learned anything from past? Yes and no. But that will differ between the different countries as well. Because this has also been a debate in the Arctic Council for some years ago. And of course, this has to do with sustainable development. It has to be with protection of ecological and marine environment and so on. And you have to strike that balance. But I believe that it is possible if you actually sit together around the table and discuss. But you can't discuss if your starting point is that I'm not going to accept anything. It's going to be like it's always been. Because the world is changing. Sorry. It won't be as it's always been, either if you say yes or no. The question is, what are you going to do with the changes that are happening, and how do we proceed? And one of the questions you also had, Greg, was whether we are in the paradigm of cost per kilowatt hours. Right. And we are somewhat still in that, but this is why the states are putting together different funds. They are we have the mechanism of the CO2 prices and so on, trying to establish a framework that actually says that, yes, it can be some paradigm in the future, but ultimately, if you ask a consumer or a business, do you want a little bit higher price, but a steady price the next 10 years? Or do you want a little bit lower price, and you never know what it's going to be tomorrow? Most of them will say yes to the stable price and accept a little surplus on the top as an insurance for the changing of the price, because it makes stability. And in the changing and the industry building that also Kjell was talking about here, you will need the stable prices to actually make this transition happen. And you can't invest away from Ohm's law anyway. you are losing electricity if you're sending on the grid. So in an industrial perspective, it will also always be most value to actually make the product nearest the plant or the electricity factor. Sure. That's a fact. You have to take that into consideration. But of course, that will mean you got a factory in your backyard. See if you are a reindeer herder or a local municipality, and sorry, it's not like Wi-Fi. No. It shows. Yeah. Yeah. And you have to accept that if we are going to solve the bigger problems.
No. Thank you, Willfred. It's that question about change. It goes back to that, and human beings, and I know academics always think on the front edge and change, but it's the old joke, you know, how many academics does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is change. It's but this is a good segue into the final question for the panel, and some of it has been covered, so but feel free to elaborate or go in to add other examples. And this is coming reflecting on COP27, and it brings to the forefront we've got to deal with climate change globally, and going to a low carbon future has been alluded to by many of you on the panel. It almost invariably means more mining, whether it's for battery storage, whether it's for transmission, copper, and so on. You can go construction of transmission towers, etc. But given that a lot of, and understandably so, a lot of Arctic communities have deep reservations about the expansion of the extractive resource sector. And given this pressing global climate change imperative, what are some of the solutions, if you had some concrete examples or thoughts of approaches to deal with this kind of conundrum that we're facing in the Arctic region? And so I'll start with you, Rasmus.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I would like to start by quoting my minister, Kjell, on this, and that is basically that Greenland shall contribute to the green transition where we can. And we can contribute by providing cheap electricity for Power-to-X products, but we can also contribute by providing rare earth minerals, and we have plenty of that in Greenland. So Greenland is very keen to start and expand our mining industry. Actually, it's supposed to be one of our economic legs in the future. And there's also support in the Greenlandic population towards developing mining. But that being said, there's still the thing about not in my backyard, as you mentioned before. So you can have local resistance against something, but in general terms, the Greenlandic population is in favor of that, and it's industry we very much would like to develop. Then answering your question on how can we actually promote a scheme where it would be more attractive for local communities, and I think here it's really important that this is not just an industry that goes into an area and extract and goes out again with all the profit, that some of the money or the value created from the mining industry or the extraction industries actually stay in the community and the area. I think that's paramount.
Okay, thank you. Kristín.
Well, we of course know that if we want renewable energies, we will need to use some minerals and to make that possible. However, I think we must start with reusability and the circular economy before we sit down with people and ask for a mining right. So we who are using all this electricity, all our gadgets, we need to start thinking there. Then if we talk about mining and connection to local people and to have the discussions that you need to have with the local communities if you want to start mining, of course we have good examples how it is done. Of course you need to sit down with people and also understanding their values and value systems, and don't presume that their value system is the same as ours. It's basically is never like that. we also need to be mindful of talking to all, not just a few representatives. And then I want to bring up sort of like the gender issue here. Well, as you can see in our panel, both in energy and I think it's the same in mining, we have a big gender gap. And having in mind not just in women as professionals in these areas or as decision makers, but also as consumers. So this is something I think that we need to address also. Another thing which I think is really important, that when you talk to local people, that you make sure that it is not just value that you leave behind while you are there, but also afterwards. And that is, of course, something that we have seen in the past. Communities thriving while the industry is there and then suffering afterwards. So this is a dialogue, but we have many good examples of where this is done very well. One thing in mind was a local community, I think it was in Canada, where they were trying to put in solar panels. And the best situation for the solar panels was where the wild blueberries were. And for the people living there, picking blueberries was a really valuable thing. So, of course, they had to have sort of like a middle ground. So now they are picking blueberries within the solar panels. So there is always, you can adjust in the values, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Kjell.
Thank you. This topic is a very interesting topic, because looking into the situation in Europe, this address, I would say, one of the main topics that is happening now. That 35 million industry jobs in Europe are in danger, and they are. Going from being a top region in the world, producing technology, innovation, in few years, we can be in a backyard. This is a situation in the industry, 35 million industry jobs in Europe are facing now. And one of the answers to this is, of course, a broader value creation of energy, natural resources, jobs, and taking care of the climate. And then the mining industry has a vital role to play. But as Willfred said, this will have to impact someone in a negative way. But the first thing that we have to do, related to as I see it, to the mining industry, is that we need to create more a circular economy where you have the mining industry. You have to produce low carbon metal. You have to produce another parts of this. My fellow speaker will probably say more of this. So local people share on this and don't see only the minerals being taken out of their area and exporting elsewhere in the world. And we have fantastic opportunities because we have so much renewables close to the minings and to the resources. And finally, I will give a word about circular economy, because that's one of the main issues related to mining. And I will use copper as an example, because that is one of the mostly used metal and very important for the shift. But it's also the metal that is mostly reused in the world. We cannot reuse it more than we do. We reuse nearly 100% of the copper. And anyone, I could say raise hands, but they're raising the chairs, who say that we don't need more copper. We need double, we need more than that. So we need mining also of copper. We reuse already 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Hákun.
Yeah, everything we do, we have to do it in a sustainable way. And when we buy wind turbines, solar panels, batteries, we have to ask if it's manufactured in a sustainable way. Looking at the whole life cycle. Sometimes the industry does some shortcuts to get some advantages in competitions. But to avoid this, the political system has to put up rules for these activities, so they have to be run in a sustainable way. And so regulations and for handling and documentation of the whole life cycle of products is needed. For that, we can use green accounts for all companies in all industries, and that I see as a way forward. Together with some standards for ESG reporting, which already are in place and can be implemented broadly. And we have to also to be aware of that there is a transition period in this. And for this, we need still cooperation between the industry, society, scientists, and authorities on behalf of the political system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hákun. Martin.
Well, when I think of COP27, of course, we think of the urgency needed, the CO2, the carbon, decarbonisation that's required on an urgent scale. I think definitely the ambitious environmental policy is a key part for the mining industry to really provide, I think, assurance and confirmation that we can work under these guidelines. I think clearly environmental law is an important part of the first stage of increasing the amount of mining. Dry tailings, or in other words, getting rid of wet dams, and obviously going into more of around the rehabilitation processes and closure, as I mentioned before. But clearly, environmental law plays a key part of how mines need to operate and be sustainable. I think that's a key policy. It's also driving the permit process. And I guess I can't leave the floor unless I at least mention that there is a decline in the number of mines in Europe, and there is a decline in the number of processing capacity for raw materials. And that is clearly a result of long lead times or long lag times in getting raw material supply chains started. And it's done at the local level. But it is a key driver, not just around what we're trying to do, but even future investors coming in. So I do think environmental law plays a key part in those two levers, both in approvals, but also in compliance and making sure that mines are sustainable. Just to answer the circular economy, we are operating in northern Sweden. It is completely 100% renewable. It's incredibly energy intensive, both the mining, but we're operating with other companies such as LKAB, who are involved in rare earths, recovery from waste materials, and Boliden. All of us are downstream. All of us are not just mining and exporting. We are mining and we're processing within the Arctic area. So we are making advanced materials, and our customers are in Sweden. We're in the European Battery Alliance, and we have Sweden's largest battery customer not far from us. So these are these are all part of understanding that mining companies are moving further and further downstream, and we are bringing batteries back to the mine, and we are operating vehicles now underground that are completely electric. So it's happening, and I would encourage you to look at the mining industry differently and make sure that you understand that we are not exporting these minerals, they are staying here, and it is a circular economy, and we're part of the recycling chain. So where there is minerals and value from copper, we're putting it back into our supply chain. Just one other comment, which is, I guess, around displacement and I guess land and conservation. There is definitely within Europe, obviously a large portion of land that's already quarantined. So these areas are getting smaller and smaller. So policy around, so the Critical Raw Materials Act that is coming out, I hope in 2023, will provide more clarity around perhaps priorities and I guess development timelines and permitting, but also managing the Indigenous groups is, I think that there are guidelines from the United Nations around racial discrimination, and there are obviously guidelines to do with free, prior, informed consent and how mining companies should be dealing with groups. So I think some of that is still to be developed and incorporated into local law. Certainly how Indigenous groups, what rights do they have, and how do they have a right to negotiate? So it's difficult to have dialogue when actually the other party doesn't perhaps have rights to negotiate but you're just providing dialogue. So there are a number of areas. I think there's still Europe and the way that we're working can help and solve this issue that we all want, which is decarbonisation.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, and last but not least, Willfred.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of the countries has a system in place regarding consultation with local municipalities, indigenous peoples, and so on. But in the end, you will, as I said before, you will have to actually be at the table and be willing to get into some compromises. And if not, you won't be able to move forward. And when Kristín is telling us that we have to try to do more circular, that won't be enough. That's the bare truth. And if people think that will be sufficient to actually make the green shift, then you're fooling yourself, because that won't be enough materials. And we are talking about mining now for the large mine and so on the copper, for example. But of course, if we are looking into the green shift, the new technology, both in the health side and in different transportation areas, space, and not least, the rare materials and the rare minerals going to play an extremely much more crucial role into the future. And when we was talking about energy, security, and so on, this will also apply to minerals, not necessarily because Europe or a country should be self-sufficient on their own, because we will have to trade to actually have cultural experience, make each other better, innovation, technology, and so on. But you will have to have resilience if things changes. You have to have an insurance in place, and one of those insurances will be that we actually produce more of our own use self. Either it's food, electricity, energy, minerals, other consumer goods and so on in a larger scale. And then we also have to solve the problems with shipping goods around the world and the pollution that goes with that at the same time. But if we don't have more self-sustainability on a lot of the different levels, you won't, and when we get a large shift, a climate crisis, which might be happening whenever, you don't know when it's coming, it will be better if there are several places that you actually do this on European soil and not abroad, far abroad in countries we don't share the values with. We don't like how the workforce are managed. We have child work, human rights abuses, and so on and so on. And thereby, we also have to accept that it has to show more in our local areas or local municipality that we actually have to make use of that mineral in the ground. We have to have the energy plant, and we have to do it in a smarter, more innovative and sustainable way than we have done before. Because some of the old history about if it either it's a hydropower plant facility and so on is one of the reasons why people also will be very negative. Yeah. So both politician makers and the businesses and the research society has to say, wait a second, here, there are better options to actually do this on the table. We just have to have the opportunity to discuss how we minimize the consequences and making most of the possibilities for everyone.
Great, thank you. And I think, Kjell, you wanted to make one last point. And then they're going to...
Yes. When you're in a panel like this, of course, you forgot something. And related to the minerals, it's also an invitation, because Europe and US and UK and Norway has unique competence in offshore technology, right. And can be in the forefront in the mining industry on the seabed. Sure. So that's why Norway has started a process opening areas in the north for seabed mining for rare minerals on several thousand meters depth. But it is in a region where both Iceland and Greenland and Norway and UK and others. So we are not saying that we are going to do it, but we are saying we are looking into it, what can be there, and how can it be be done in a sustainable way.
Thank you. What I'll do, I hate to cut off a politician, but no, I'm just being mindful of time. What we'll probably do is take a couple of questions from the floor, and then at coffee break, because we don't want to completely compact the coffee break, our guests, I haven't asked them, but they've graciously offered to approach them at coffee break with any follow-up questions. Okay, please.
Hello, thank you very much for your insights. My name is Arthur Amlot. I'm a student of the College of Europe in Belgium. I would like to ask a question regarding demography, because as you mentioned it, Mr. Nordlund, when we are talking about energy and resources security, we're also talking about how do we attract people. How do you attract people, to get into mining, to get into extracting resources, etc., etc. And from last year at the Arctic Circle Assembly, and from last year in the same event that we're here today, there was mentioning perspective of demographic depletion in the Arctic. So I think it was in Finland. I know that you're all representing different constituency. That's the context is different regarding Faroe Islands, regarding Finland, regarding Sweden, Norway, Greenland. But how do you see tackling this issue of demographic depletion in the case of Scandinavia, and in the case of Greenland? How do you see attracting more people to your territory? As I think Greenland has a demography of less than 60,000, and therefore to attract this demography to open mines, but also to open all the attractive sub-economies throughout it. So schools, doctors, shops, etc., etc. So how would be your perspective regarding this? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Is this one on? I think it's on now. Yeah, it's a huge challenge, no doubt about that. And this is not only, as you said, about attracting the actual workforce who should work in a mine. It's also attracting the sort of supporting institutions like hospitals and so forth. It's something that we are struggling with on an everyday basis, actually already now, and I'm not sure that we can actually handle it. we definitely need, if we want to open up new mines, large-scale mines in Greenland, of course we can place people from the fishery industry into the mining industry, but to be honest, I'm not sure that the people working in the fishery industry want to make that shift. And in that case, we would need to import workforce. And then comes another question, does the Greenlandic society actually want to have this immigration into its country? That's a political decision. I'm not going to speak about that, but it's definitely a challenge and something we need to handle, and Greenland needs to handle if it wants to develop this industry as well. Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to come a little bit into this because coming from Iceland, we are not many there, and this is one of the big issues when you are talking about new industries, new opportunities. Because in some industries, the scales are so big that the communities cannot, you don't have the workforce to work in these new industries. And then it's sort of like the next question, are you then going to import people? And what kind of society are you then making? So I think this is a very critical question for everybody that is planning sort of like new industries in their areas. Do you have the workforce? Do you have the social acceptance? Do you have the infrastructure to do this? And for many opportunities, it's basically a no. I was just thinking about the chemical industry, which is if you're talking about e-fuels or one of the, which will be a big industry in the future, there it seems to be the economy or scale is really large, especially if you're talking about fuels for like aviation. And then it's sort of like, do you have the manpower to do that? So it's a really interesting question, and I know that Greenland has been struggling with that also. Yeah.
Some few words from our company. Because of this vision, 100 by 2030, actually we are very visible in the society, and it's very motivating for young people to get jobs at the company. So we get many applications for jobs in the company. And from time to others, also foreign people come from abroad are applying for jobs.
Okay, thank you. Árn.
I would make a comment just adding to the challenge, which is to avoid fly in, fly out. And community are very, very focused on companies that are building in that area and engaging more of the employees into the local community. So, but it just adds to the challenge. So fly in, fly out is not something we're working with. The way we're considering this challenge has been by investing in technology, digitalization. You can now operate mines from the surface. In fact, you can operate equipment underground from another town. So there's ways to bring that into the marketing and the way to engage with the younger generation. Technology of batteries and having a purpose around being part of the solution around climate change and changing the way people view what you're trying to do and making that a key to how you are interviewing and I guess giving information about your company that it's about sustainability and we're employing something of like 6 or 7 environmental scientists. We have material scientists and people who are I think really investing in the future of new products and new technologies. So we have one mining engineer and geologists. Of course, they enjoy what they're doing, but I think the fact that in the same room there's people there who are making advanced materials and other people working on environmental, it's creating a dynamic around your company that's how we're working.
Final question from our colleague from Greenland.
Is it on? So I come from Greenland, from CUTU, the first registered social enterprise in Greenland. And I just would like to ask Rasmus about, we have a third of our young population in Greenland not employed or in the educational system at the moment. So how will you work to create a more sustainable labor force or a sustainable labor market within Greenland? Because we already import a lot of labor force.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a huge issue. What we're doing right now within this is not so much mining, this is more energy, that we have a dialogue with the educational institution that trains people in Greenland to do construction work and try to take more people in. I would say, though, that I think one of the main problems when it comes to the youth is the basic education, and we definitely need to make sure that more young people finalize a basic education. Is extremely important, and basically you cannot build a future for Greenland without bringing these young people into the workforce. It's paramount that they sort of add value to the society and they become citizens who is working and being sort of part of what's going on. So it's very true, and it's something that Naalakkersuisut, the Greenlandic government, has to focus more on. I totally agree with you on that.
Great. Well, at this point, can we thank our panelists for the wonderful insights they brought today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, panelists. Coffee break for those who want a shot of caffeine. Back here at 3:30, please. Thank you.